The size of the hog industry basically is driven by last year's profits. This is an industry that responds to profits and losses, takes a while. And in the case of the hog industry, last year's profits were the highest ever. 2014, best year to be in the hog business ever, for several reasons. One of which is feed costs finally backed down off of that $7, $8 a bushel corn stuff that we had for a while there. And feed costs a huge component of the cost of raising hogs, of course. And the other thing is we had record high hog prices last year. PED took away enough pigs that slaughter was down sharply, and so you end up with record prices. Hog slaughter last year down 4.6%, due almost entirely PED. But pork production wasn't down 4.6%, down 1.5% compared to the year before, because hog farmers, being the generous, concerned people they are, didn't want anybody to do without pork, and I guess we fed them a lot bigger. Weights were up sharply, and so the total drop in pork production wasn't all that great. Cost production, mostly feed, of course. Corn is if you can predict corn prices, you can usually predict the cost of raising hogs in the United States pretty darn closely, because soybean meal and the other feed ingredients tend to track with it. This is the monthly average price of corn thus far this century in green, and futures market closed yesterday is in blue. So we're looking at corn prices basically, at least in the Corn Belt, upper 3s to lower 4s, a bit higher, of course, in this part of the country. Iowa State cost production, they've done this calculation monthly since 1965, and looks like that. Their old calculation is red. They upped the efficiency. If you'll notice here for last year and this year, there's a second price, a lower cost production. They looked at the industry and decided there's been improvement over their baseline, and they lowered the cost. And then the green here is simply plugging in futures prices for corn and bean meal and where we're headed, which is basically on a live weight basis, break evens the rest of this year and next year in 50 to 53 cents a pound live, or on a carcass basis be 67, 68 through the lower 70s. So a bit higher, but still far lower cost production than we've had for a number of years. Meat supply, a lot of meat out there. Most years. The red line is U.S. beef production annually, 1945 through the forecast for 15 this year and 16 next year. Pork is the purple line on here. If you look closely, USDA is forecasting more pork this year than beef. That doesn't happen very often. It's the first time in my lifetime if we pull it off. But 1952 was the last year in which pork production exceeded beef production. Turkey production fairly steady, and then you got that green line across there. What's the old saying? Only three things in life that are certain: death, taxes, and 3% more chicken than we had last year. And it didn't really work that well when corn was $7 or $8, but the broiler industry is growing again. Competing meats more. Lower feed costs, the livestock and poultry industry grows. If USDA's forecast is 4.5% more beef next year than this year, the July inventory on the cattle herd was up for the second year in a row. This year's calf crop expected to be larger than last year for the second year in a row. Cattle prices are record high. Cattle farmers can't stand prosperity either, so they're saving heifers. The herd's growing to get us more meat. Chicken production up 4.4% this year, another 2.8% next year. Turkey, avian influenza, and turkey production's down this year, even though it started off the year with plans to produce more, and so looking at a fairly hefty increase. Total 2.9% more meat being produced next year than this year. Population doesn't grow that fast. USDA says 2 more pounds of meat per person to consume in 16 than this year, and that'll be a drag on meat prices. Total per capita consumption trended higher for the longest time. You got corn up a little bit too pricey, and it dipped there, but we're back into a situation where The average American can expect most years to consume more meat than they did the year before. Demand index. Meat demand overall is fairly simple. If the economy does well, meat demand usually goes up. Americans like meat. You run a recession through the economy, like we did back in 2008-9, and meat demand suffers. And that captures most things. Every once in a while you get a bit of an outlier. You notice a fabulous performance on meat demand 2004. Anybody remember good old Dr. Atkins and high-protein, low-carb diets? It's one of the few odd things that's big enough to show up in the data. It really gave us a kick. Unfortunately, like all diets, they come, they go. We gave it back 2 years later. Domestic demand for pork on a monthly basis, again, the economy is growing, pork demand's increasing also. Restaurant performance index, when people have money to spend, they eat more meals out, and so that index is up. Now, one of the other interesting things, you break out, on the retail price level, we get 3 different cuts of pork reported. This is monthly prices of boneless pork chops in grocery stores in blue, bacon in grocery stores in red, boneless ham in grocery stores in green. And the amazing thing is what's happened to bacon demand and bacon prices. Bacon is an in food right now. I hope it's not a fad. I like to think of it as consumers just finally figured out how fabulously good bacon actually tastes, and we're putting it on hamburgers and turkey sandwiches and in salads or whatever. But bacon prices, and by extension, pork belly prices, have been very strong and continue to be so. The other thing on here is blue. That's boneless pork chops. Bit disappointing in the last couple years. At times, boneless ham prices has been higher. That doesn't reflect all that well on where that normally you'd think a boneless pork chop ought to sell at. And he gets down this issue of is a boneless pork chop quite as good eating anymore as it used to be. International trade has a big deal. U.S. exports a lot of meat. What we've got here is annual data, 1988 forward. The green line is annual exports of chicken, broilers. The red line's annual export of pork. The light blue line down here is annual turkey exports. And the dark blue line is annual exports of beef. We had a bit of a problem, it seems. 2004. Anybody remember why? Yeah, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, mad cow disease. Health matters a lot. As Lisa told us this morning, it's international trade issues, and what diseases you have in your herd matters, as the cattle industry found out big time with mad cow disease back a decade or so ago. What is exports worth to hog farmers? If you add up the value of pork we export, the pork byproduct, which is blue on here, last year we exported $62.45 worth of pork for every hog we killed in America. So you don't want to lose those markets. As a share, this is U.S. share of international pork trade. Any given year, about 1/3 of all the pork moving in international trade is being shipped from the United States, and somewhere around 6-7% of the pork moving in international trade is headed to the United States. Variety meats. And most of the money, of course, is in the muscle cuts, but the tongue, the kidney, the liver, the pig's feet, those kind of things also add value. It's a fair mix. It's not like on the cattle side, on the byproducts. Cattle hides really dominate that component on the cattle side. Trivia question I always like to ask: anybody happen to know what the largest single use of cow hides in America is? A lot of it goes into shoes and, of course, car seats. But actually, the biggest single use of cowhide in America is holding cows together. Anyway, but they are also looking at a softer export situation this year. And realize that a lot of these byproducts, there's not all that much demand to try to move them through U.S. grocery stores. One of the reasons for the weakness, the dollar is strong. This is trade-weighted exchange rate, the U.S. dollar against foreign currencies. And the way this works is this. I mean, you look at the chart. If you're a foreigner and you want to buy U.S. pork, U.S. corn, U.S. beans, U.S. cars, whatever, two-step process. Number one, you buy U.S. dollars. And then you use those U.S. dollars to buy pork, buy beef, buy whatever. This tells you what it costs you to buy U.S. dollars. And for foreigners, buying dollars has gotten a lot more expensive. And if it gets too pricey, then you never make it to step two, buying U.S. products. Now, where are we going on this? I mean, why is the dollar so strong? It's not really we do a lot of things right. We're here a lot of times simply by default. The major alternative to trading in U.S. dollars is trading in euros. And if you've been following the situation on the euro and Greece, you'll know that a lot of questions about the survivability, sustainability of that currency. China just devalued the renminbi this month, so by extension the U.S. dollar gets stronger. And the other thing on this is, if you followed the Federal Reserve Bank discussion, Janet Yellen, the chairman, seems real interested in raising interest rates. Higher interest rates should be expected to make the dollar stronger, which makes it tougher to export U.S. products. We had a problem. The West Coast docks slowed down. The contracts the longshoremen had expired last year, and they never went on strike. They just found that they were able to do less work each day. And for a perishable product like meats, that's not a good deal. If it takes longer to get through the ports, that means shorter shelf life in Japanese grocery stores. Export demand numbers have been negative since last August. So it's on the demand side. Domestic demand looks pretty good. Export demand hasn't been doing real well. Exports as a percent of production, somewhere around 20, 22, 25% of the pork we produce coming out of packing plants each month. It gets exported. About 4%, 5% of what we eat was imported. And for byproducts, the numbers are much higher on percent exported. Biggest customers, the red is pork shipments to Japan for a long time. Japan was always our biggest foreign customer. Last year, Mexico passed them up. That's the light green triangles on there. They're now our biggest foreign customer. Canada has been a steady growth market, although with the strength of the dollar recently, not so much. The Canadian dollar has really lost value relative to the U.S. dollar, which means moving stuff south for Canadian hog farmers will work real good. Moving stuff back north for Canadian retailers doesn't work so well. Then you got some highly variable markets. The purple on here is China. Back when they held the Olympics in Beijing, they brought in an awful lot of pork to make sure all the reporters saw plenty of it. But the Olympics was short-term, 2 months, and that was over. They bought quite a bit late 2011. Lately, not so much. The other major customer on here in dark blue is South Korea. They've been a pretty good market thus far this year. Live hogs also move across our border. 2007, 10 million live hogs, and they all come from Canada. We're now at about a short 5 million live hogs coming south, and probably going to stay there. We do export some live hogs. If you're in the front row, you can see those red bars down there, but it pales compared to what we export. If we look at what comes south from Canada, the green is feeder and weaner pigs coming south. On a monthly basis, the red is slaughter hogs. Far more young pigs than slaughter hogs come south. Over half of the slaughter hogs are cull sows and boars. Not all that many bears and gilts. Productivity growth. If you're in a hog business, you guys are getting better. This is pigs per sow per year in the United States, national average, 1930 through last year, although you can see the last year or two, PED certainly hasn't helped on that score. But carcass weights, not only make more of them, we sell them bigger. On average, this goes up a tad bit over a pound per year and has done so for 50 years. We do this, if you look at slaughter weights on cattle, the same thing. Slaughter weights on chickens, the same thing. We keep, over time, we kill them bigger. Total pork production per sow used to steadily increase somewhere around an average of 2%. The last several decades, 2.7%. So you're not only getting better at what you do, you're getting better faster than your parents or your grandparents got better at raising hogs. Total pork production in the United States. This pork is the most consistent commodity production-wise we have in U.S. agriculture. This is how much pork we produce each year, 1930 forward, and I've drawn a 1.5% trend line on there. You could have predicted last year's pork production within 0.1% accuracy off of that black line. We occasionally get above, but we slow down production when we do so. We drop below it and then we speed up. So it's a very consistent growth industry. In pork, now of course, because weights go up, we're not growing as fast. 0.9% increase in the number of hogs we slaughtered. So we're producing more hogs long term, year over year. But we don't need more sows to do so because of the fact that pigs per litter and litters per sow per year keeps growing so fast. We're declining the number of sows in America about 0.7%. So it's a fascinating thing. You look at the 20th century, 100 years. In that 100 years, we never produced more pork than we did in 1999. Sounds reasonable. There's more people to feed, more exports. In that same 100 years, we never had fewer sows than in 1999. Your industry is going to keep producing more pork and more hogs because the world wants it. But if history keeps repeating, we're going to actually do it with fewer sows, not more. PED, of course, we've talked about that a fair amount. Seasonal impact, really nasty, a lot of problems. The first winter of 2013-14 showed up in packing plants. If you look at monthly data on pigs per litter, we were down about 5.5% in pigs per litter in that first winter. That's the biggest decline on record. As far as the USDA hog and pigs data, we've never had a disease hit the industry as hard, as fast, and as broadly as PED did. But where are we? We're not back on trend, but pigs per litter in that March, April, May quarter was a new all-time record high. So we've gone a long way towards recovering fully. Question is, are we going to be able to continue to manage and control PED as effectively as we have in the past year? If you look pigs per litter by quarter, long-term trend is 1% more, and that March, April, May was above trend. Inventories, market hog numbers, very big. USDA said 113% or 13.4% more heavyweight market hogs on the first day of June. When I saw that, I said, oh, surely not. But if you look at slaughter, they were within 0.1% on that. We killed lots of hogs this summer. We continue to kill a lot. If you look at, as we move through the lighter and lighter weight groups on June 1, which became our July, then our August, then our September, we've got lots of pigs coming up. So I thought that was too high, but they were pretty well right. The other flip side of this, you get down into sows farrowed. Intentions for June, July, August, down 2.5%. This fall, farrowing intentions, down 4.3%. When I saw the data, I said, that's too high and that's too low. I was wrong there. I hope I'm wrong there. But, if you look at sort of history, it's sort of hard to to anticipate. Normally you get those kind of cutbacks after a period of substantial financial losses, and I just don't see that happening. There's also the argument that we may have shifted, because of trying to cope with PED, shifted the fairing date on some sows that may help account for that drop-off, but that's a pretty big drop. Sows farrowed by quarter. Your industry's still very cyclical. Go through good times, we later farrow more sows. We go through bad times, we cut back. It's cyclical. The problem is the length of the cycle is not real consistent, so it doesn't go all that far towards helping you manage. But count on the fact, if you make a lot of money raising hogs, other people are going to raise more hogs even if you don't. We've got data from packers who count bears and gilts in the mix for us. And our gilt retention data still says it's higher than sow death loss. Fortunately, most sows die in packing plants, and USDA kindly counts those for us, so we only have to estimate on-farm death loss. But our numbers would argue that we haven't really cut back yet on the breeding herd. The matchup with USDA's forecast off those hog and pig reports, which is the blue stair steps. The actual slaughter is the red numbers. You may think, gosh, USDA forecasts this stuff awfully well, but those are revised numbers after the fact. They're pretty good at forecasting the past, which means they obviously employ a number of economists on their staff. It's forecasting the future is a bit more of a challenge, but you look at those numbers and you couldn't hardly improve upon what they told us in that June pig report. Hog slaughter, the record was 2008. We was down a lot. I'm old-fashioned. I always like to talk about hog slaughter. People concerned about image tell me at times we should talk about how many hogs we're harvesting or processing. Slaughter sounds so cruel. That's the one. What do you think? Talk about the number of pigs that assume room temperature as an alternative. But anyway, the number assuming room temperature last year was down. But this year it's going to come in not at a record, but should be the second highest number through processing plants ever. Weights, again, I alluded to the fact last year when we were short on hogs, you guys fed them bigger. Weights were up. What we've got here, this is weeklies. The green line was 2013, then 14, which was last year. By the fall of 2013, that's about the first or last week in October, I guess it was, we set a new all-time record for the heaviest average weight of hogs in packing plants ever, and we went above it and stayed there all through 2014. And it wasn't until June of this year that we finally got down below records. But hog farmers filled in for those lack of hogs by putting on weight, and right now you can see weights have been under year-ago levels since late March, and I expect them to stay that way through the rest of this year and into next year. What else? Again, last year hog slaughter was down. This year it's up. We were up down 4.6 last year. Up 8.4% year to date, and we're probably going to end the year somewhere between 8 and 9% above last year. Pork production, though, it wasn't down at 4.6%, down 1.5% last year, and we're not going to be up 8 to 9. 7.7 so far, probably somewhere between 7 and 7.5%. So you actually help moderate the total pork supply by adjusting weights. You put them both on the same chart. For the longest time, pork production was up more than slaughter, and now slaughter's up more than pork production. Packers. This is a calculation of gross margin. That is, for the average hog, what did they sell the pork and the byproducts, subtract off what they paid for the hogs, and this is the overall margin. This is what's available to pay for their employees, pay for the building, pay for the utilities, pay for the shipping containers and everything. And last year was a very good year. If you look thus far this year, which is the black, Also another good year, which means I guess we shouldn't be surprised. We're about to gain more packing plants. We don't build big packing plants very often in this country. The newest one is Triumph Foods, opened that St. Joe plant 9 years ago. Seaboard opened their Guyman plant 11 years ahead of that. So about once a decade we open a new plant, but we're scheduled to get 2 of them in opening in 2017. Seaboard Triumph joint venture in Sioux City, Iowa, and Clemens Food in Coldwater, Michigan. Based upon history, that should be enough to squeeze the margin between farm price and cutout value. The packing industry should get considerably less profitable, especially with 2 plants coming on. But it's also probably going to put pressure on some old plant somewhere to get shut down. But anyway, tighter margins are good for news if you're selling hogs. Tighter margins aren't such good news if you run processing plants. Another bit of news recently, of course, is Cargill's announcement they're going to sell out of their hog and pork business to JBS Swift. Cargill has 2 packing plants, Ottumwa, Iowa, Bridgetown, Illinois, 5 feed mills, 2 in Missouri, 1 in Iowa, Arkansas, and Texas, 4 hog farms. As you can see, 2 in Arkansas, 1 in Oklahoma and Texas, for $1.4 billion. Looked like, I don't know much. It looked like a good number to me if you're the seller. But JBS will move up and become the 2nd largest hog packer in America. This will give them more kill capacity than Tyson has, who's the current number 2. Well, and another related issue is the way we price hogs. And this is percent hogs sold on the spot market. Off of some surveys that our department did, my colleague Glenn Grimes did for years now. USDA includes this in mandatory price reporting, so we don't have to survey anymore. But traditionally, of course, when the hogs got ready to go to market, you called up the buying station or the packer and you haggled over the price and to see who got it and stuff. Those days are gone. Most hogs are under contract. You negotiate a contract, and so that packer is going to get those hogs, and there's some sort of formula or whatever sets the price. Most of those formulas include spot market prices. And this is what share of bears and gilts are contributing to that spot market price, that negotiated price, as USDA calls it, that goes into so many of those formulas. And I don't know how low this can go. Well, I know how low it can go to 0. But at what point in time does it stop being a good proxy for the value of hogs and something that producers and packers will feel comfortable about? If you want to know how we sold hogs last year, again, off mandatory price reporting data, we can pretty well zero in. If for the bears and gilts packers bought last year, this is the breakdown. 4% of them were sold to non-mandatory price reporting packers. If you're a small packing plant, you don't have to report. Only the big guys do. So it's 4% unknown. 96% was sold to packers who have to report daily. 0.8% of that 96 was sold negotiated on a live weight basis. 2.6 was negotiated on a carcass weight basis. That off that previous table, that 3 over there would be 2.6 if I added the decimal. 38.9% was some sort of market formula, a contract that included either pork cutout value or hog prices in that formula. 10% were that's basically a forward contract off the Chicago Mercantile Exchange lean hog futures contract, which, by the way, is cash settled to that 2.6%. So you take this away, and that doesn't work, and that doesn't work. 12.5% other. There's always an other category. Some of those won't work. 4% were sold from one packer to another. Some of those sales wouldn't work. And then 27.2% of the bears and gilts were never sold when alive. That is, they were raised by a company that owned a packing plant, and so the pigs weren't sold. The pork was sold after they were slaughtered. Another issue, country of origin labeling. I don't know if you followed the saga on that. Was written into the 2002 Farm Bill, finally went into effect in 2009. Canada and Mexico has sued us in the WTO, World Trade Organization, about it. We've lost 4 times. It looks like we're about to get some tariffs. The WTO has told Canada and Mexico they can impose tariffs, retaliatory tariffs on U.S. products that go into their countries. There's a September 15-16 meeting in Geneva to agree upon the magnitude of those tariffs. The U.S. House voted to repeal country of origin labeling for the meats, which would solve the problem if the Senate would do so, but they went home. Whether we're going to get the Senate to act and then whether the President signs it or not, up in arms. But barring that, sometime this fall, Canada and Mexico will start levying extra taxes on U.S. products going into their countries, and it's pretty well up to Canada and Mexico to pick the products. Now, as a hog industry, if we're lucky, they'll put the tariff on chicken and beef and something else. But if it ends up on pork going into the countries, we could see a considerably decline in exports. Time will tell. Hog prices. This is for meat prices, retail prices. Thus far this century, monthly average price in grocery stores across America. Beef, all fresh beef, a little over $6 a pound. Hamburger, ground beef is over $4 a pound in the average grocery store in America. Pork, seasonally, you can see the sort of grocery store prices are higher in the summertime, as our hog prices, of course, lower in the winter. We're up a bit, but that spread between pork and beef in the meat case has never been as large as it was this year. Average price of chicken in grocery stores is those sort of reddish squares across there. The gap, a little bit smaller now, but was record high late last year, early this year for between pork and chicken, and the gap between beef and chicken is still record high. And then the green line down here is turkey in grocery stores. Cutout value, quite a difference. More hogs or fewer hogs make. 5-year average, January through December, of pork cutout value is red. The dashed line was last year, the highest ever. The blue line was this year. In April, pork cutout value and hog prices were half of a year ago. We sort of saw the PED thing coming, and we ran hog prices up early last year, ran cutout value up early, and that wasn't the case this year. Byproduct, again, as I mentioned earlier, byproduct values were off 10% year to date in exports tonnage, off 14% in dollar value of those exports. Bearing prices, again, back in the spring of 2014, we were, 127 or so for a weekly average, and this year 56, 57, half of a year ago, because we had a lot more hogs and pork. Seasonally, of course, hog prices tend to decline as you move in the fourth quarter. Summer prices are almost always the highest of the year, and somewhere during the winter usually gets us the lowest prices of the year. Forecast, this is USDA's forecast. This year, 24.58 billion pounds of pork, up 7.6% from last year. That's why your hog prices are down so. Next year, up only a half. Again, and the key thing in there is those farrowing intentions in that June report. Down for this summer, down for fall. weights are probably going to stay down. But, like I said, I was a little bit skeptical we're going to be down that much. So I'm a bit skeptical we won't be up but 0.5% next year. But keep in mind, we're going to have more beef, we're going to have more chicken, we're going to have more turkey next year. So we don't need a whole lot more pork for sure. Prices last year, this on the carcass weight basis, this Iowa, Minnesota, $102.83 per hundredweight. By far the highest year ever for hog prices. And this year, somewhere around $67 per hundredweight is what we expect it to come in at. And lower again next year. Now this is based on that 0.5% increase coming off of those varying intentions. I would guess we might see a few more hogs and maybe a bit lower price than that. What's it looked like for the last 13 years or so? Monthly average price is red. If you plug in futures, the futures market basically says we're going sideways. The seasonal pattern is going to stay there. We're going to be lower this fall and winter than we will be next summer, and we're going to go back down. But compared to where we've been this year, not a whole lot different. They basically don't disagree with USDA's forecast of just slightly lower prices next year than this year. Profitability, Iowa State. Again, they've Gene Futrell started this, and your colleagues in the econ department have done a great job keeping it going. This is the profitability month by month of Iowa fair to finish operations. Over here, color-wise, notice the difference. Those are green. That's the forecast. You just simply plug in lean hog futures, corn futures, soybean meal futures, look at past relationship. That looks like what we should be headed to, which says you're going to lose a little bit of money here in the fall, make pretty good money in the summer of 2016, and then lose a bit in the fall of 16. It leaves next year pretty well a break-even year if the futures market is right on corn, bean meal, and hog prices. The other thing that's really neat about the Iowa State Series, again, monthly since 1965, but it's one of the best predictors of where we're headed long-term in the industry. What we've got on here, look at the blue dots. Those are profitabilities off that Iowa State calculation. This is quarterly data rather than monthly, but last year was a fabulous year. We've never made that much money. But anyway, that's what the profitability series looks like. The red dots is percent change in hog slaughter 5 quarters or 15 months later. And the fit's not perfect, but by and large, Iowa hog farms make money, and 5 quarters later, we got lots of hogs to kill. And Iowa hog farmers lose money, and 5 quarters later we don't have very many hogs to kill. Here's where we are. We were making a lot of money first quarter this year, second quarter this year we killed lots of hogs. The profit series said you got to get through third quarter this year, fourth quarter this year, first quarter next year before we get back down to more normal levels. So this would argue also a few more hogs coming to market next year than USDA has predicted.